This story is a work of fiction, inspired by real events. Names, dates, locations, and identifying details have been changed or dramatized to protect privacy and enhance the narrative. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental or used fictitiously. This content is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. It does not aim to glorify crime, promote violence, or pass judgment on real individuals. Viewer discretion is advised. Some scenes may contain mature, disturbing, or triggering content. What you are about to watch could have happened anywhere, to anyone. It's inspired by real events. Whispers of truth buried beneath layers of fiction. We've changed the names, the dates, the locations, but the emotions, the betrayal, the fear, those are real. This story is not meant to accuse, only to reveal, to make you question, who do you really trust? If stories like this keep you thinking, long after they end, hit subscribe, smash like, and drop your theory in the comments. Now watch closely, before the truth disappears again.
The call hit dispatch at 12:47 a.m. A man's voice ragged with panic. Then a hard thud. The line didn't go dead. It just breathed. Squad cars slid onto Baywood Drive, Atlanta. Mist hung low. Red and blue lights washed over brick and glass. Every porch was dark, except one. That door was open. Inside, the air was warm and metallic. A television whispered highlights to an empty room. A lamp leaned sideways, throwing torn shadows across the floor. And there he was, face down by the coffee table. Motionless. Eyes open. Silence swallowing everything. No pry marks on the frame. No shattered glass. No valuables missing. Whoever came through this door didn't need to force a way in. They were welcomed. When the flashlight found his face, the name snapped into place. Marlon K. Jeffries, 44, mentor, church speaker, the man who bought uniforms when parents couldn't, the neighbor who kept his promises, the uncle everyone said you could trust. By sunrise, whispers were moving faster than the cruisers. Not a burglary, not a stranger. Family, 16 years old. Detectives began to pull at threads. A phone that pinged 2 streets over. A pair of footprints, one smaller, one larger, fading into kitchen tile. A black earbud under a stack of mail. And a text string recovered from the victim's phone. The last message time-stamped 10:21 p.m. The kind of message that turns a house into a question. On screen, the final text appears in pale blue. Bring the jacket you borrowed. Doors unlocked. A simple sentence. An invitation. This case doesn't start with a knife or a pipe. It begins years earlier, with praise and gifts and rides home. With a boy who needed a compass. With a man the neighborhood held up as an example. And then a secret that became a wound. A wound that became a verdict before any jury ever met. On screen, a map of Atlanta resolves. A small pin lands on Baywood Drive. 2 other pins flash in sequence. A corner store camera at 10:28 p.m. and a clinic where blood work changed a life forever. Stay here. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because what happened in this house did not begin tonight, and it will not end unless we refuse to look away. Before the body, there was the image. Marlon in a crisp shirt, sleeves rolled once at the wrist, a voice that carried across a gym, a handshake at the church steps. He stayed late to sweep the floor after youth basketball. He spoke about discipline and choices, about protecting the next generation from bad roads and bad company. People nodded, they believed him. Derek Lamont Price believed him most. 16, but still holding the tone of a boy who had learned to keep things inside. His mother, LaShonda, worked double shifts to keep the lights steady and the rent paid. His father was a name more than a presence. In that gap, Marlon stepped forward. Rides to practice, a second pair of eyes on homework, a seat saved at the big games. It looked like family done right. On holidays, a paper plate loaded with ham and green beans carried across a driveway. On birthdays, a box with a neat ribbon. The card always signed with initials, never a long note. It felt polished, it felt intentional. It felt like care. On screen, a photo, the community center gym, a row of kids with medals. Marlon behind them, hand on Derek's shoulder. A proud smile. The kind of image that floats to the top when the news trucks arrive and everyone wants a quote. There were small things if you knew how to read them. Weekend trips no one else joined. A cologne bottle in a drawer that didn't belong. A watch too expensive for a boy who still lost homework in his backpack. The texture of control can feel like kindness until you know its shape. Trust is a staircase. You climb it one easy step at a time, and by the time you realize how high you are, it's too late to jump. Music softens. The staircase lingers in the mind. The change didn't announce itself. It arrived in gestures, a compliment that held longer, a hand on the shoulder that stayed past the point of normal, a ride that took the long way home because there was something important to discuss. The conversation slid from grades and practice to privacy and loyalty. Little rules wrapped in wisdom. Be careful who you trust. Don't share everything. Keep certain wins to yourself so people don't take them away. On screen a text. Proud of you today. You're special. Don't let small minds ruin your headspace. Derek absorbed it all. A boy learns to survive by listening. A boy learns to belong by believing. In a neighborhood that praises mentors, scrutiny looks like disrespect. Doubt feels like betrayal. So he chose gratitude. He chose quiet. Nights stretched in the glow of a single lamp. Movie credits rolled while talks kept going. Gifts stacked into expectation. Private turned into routine. And the line, the one no one should cross, didn't move with noise. It moved with ease. Narration leans into a pause. There is a moment that changes a life and leaves no fingerprint. No yelling, no force. Just a small, decisive shift that redefines all the minutes that came before it. From that night forward, trust was no longer a shield. It was leverage. They called it closeness. They called it family. They called it mentoring. In private, it was something else. It took the language of care and turned it into an agreement that could not be spoken. It stood on reputation like a stage. It asked for loyalty and named it protection. It demanded quiet and called it maturity. On screen, a calendar flips through months. March, May, August. Time passing without witnesses. The affair did not look like danger to the outside world. It looked like responsibility. But inside that living room, inside that car idling at the curb at midnight, a boy who craved approval now carried a secret that narrowed his life to a single doorway. Silence is heavy. It reshapes the voice. It changes how laughter sounds. It stands between a boy and his mother at the kitchen table and tells him to swallow the truth for the sake of peace. And then the body began to say what the mouth would not. Fatigue arrived first, then the fevers, the weight loss. The coach put a hand on Derek's shoulder after practice and said, "You look off. Go get checked." At the clinic, the air smelled like sanitizer and paper, tubes, labels, a bandage wrapped too tight around a thin arm. 3 days later, a call, a voice reading from a screen. Positive. Follow-up required. Schedule immediately. On screen, a lab report. Black ink. A result that cannot be wished away. The world didn't explode. It collapsed in. The corner of a room grew louder than the rest of the house. The reflection in a window became a stranger. At 16, Derek now held a truth that would mark every decision to come, every relationship, every plan. Who will believe me? Who will turn away? How do I say his name without setting fire to everything? He said nothing. For weeks, he said nothing. At church, he watched Marlon shake hands and accept praise. In the aisles at the grocery store, he heard his name spoken like a promise. He stood next to him in public and felt the floor tilt. Silence does that. It bends the ground until standing feels like work. On screen, a single sentence appears as if typed by a hesitant hand. You knew. The cursor blinks. It doesn't send. Resentment starts as heat low in the ribs. It travels. It finds the hands. It looks for somewhere to go. The night the truth left Derek's mouth, the kitchen clock sounded louder. LaShonda listened. She didn't interrupt. Her hand gripped the edge of the table and stayed there until the wood left an imprint across her palm. Keys, a door, tires on wet pavement. She didn't call first. She didn't ask for a meeting. She stood under the porch light and spoke with a voice that carried down the block. Her brother stepped out, confusion first, then composure. Denial moved across his face like a practiced motion. Accusations deflected. reputation raised like a shield. The street drew breath. Neighbors watched through curtains. Words cracked the warm night air. That house, the one with the perfect yard and the neatly stacked chairs on the porch, became a stage for a question the community did not want asked. By morning, lines had formed. Some believed the boy and his mother. Some clutched the image they had polished for years. The church whispered. The gym fell quiet when certain names were said. On screen, two posts scroll by. One says, "He would never." Another says, "Listen to kids." When the system feels far away, people look for other answers. Isolation wrapped itself around Derek like a new skin. Friends stopped texting. Teachers watched him without speaking. He walked with his hood up and learned the map of shadows between home and school. Trevin Miles stepped into that space. 21, lean, a reputation for handling his own business. He didn't need the details to recognize the shape of the harm. He listened, then sharpened the conversation. You going to let him keep walking like this? Anger likes structure. It found one. On screen, a street map animates. A path from Derek's apartment to Marlon's house. A dot pauses at a corner store camera. 10:28 p.m. They chose a night when LaShonda would be at work. They chose a time when the block drops to a hush. They chose tools that wouldn't echo down the street. A pipe, a knife. Derek told himself a story he could live with. This isn't murder. This is closure. This is a way to set a balance the world refuses to see. In the quiet, he knew another sentence. Once you cross this door, there is no way back. Music lowers to a thin hum. Rain slicked the sidewalks and turned the streetlights into long, trembling lines across blacktop. The porch light buzzed. Moss spun in small circles under the bulb. 3 knocks. Even. Familiar. The door swung open and the room greeted them the way it always had. A warm lamp, a TV murmuring sports, a couch that had held conversations people called mentoring, a coffee table stacked with mail, a black earbud hidden beneath the corner of a flyer. Words found their places. Short, careful, the kind of sentences that carry history in the spaces between them. Trey stepped through the threshold and moved like a decision. The first blow landed on the shoulder. The second found ribs. The lamp rocked and fell. The room leaned into shadow and breath. The television didn't care. Derek stood within reach, knife in hand. For a heartbeat, 2 pairs of eyes locked. Recognition and something like pleading. A lifetime of mixed messages compressed into a second. The blade went in, once, then again. When silence finally returned, it felt thick enough to hold. The TV kept whispering a score from hours earlier. The rain pressed its soft fingers against the window. They left through the door that had welcomed them in. On screen, the last frame freezes, a door closing. The hallway beyond, empty. A neighbor noticed the door standing open and called. Patrol arrived. The scene absorbed the light and gave nothing back. But details speak when people don't. No forced entry, no footprints at the back window. 2 sets of shoe prints on tile in the kitchen, one smaller, one larger. A smear of blood at hand height on the wall, where someone braced for balance. The earbud under the mail, a faint trail of wet on the welcome mat timed to the rain. On screen, the corner store camera plays in grainy monochrome. 2 figures pass the glass at 10:28 p.m. Hoods up, gaits distinct. Detective Angela Rhodes walked the block and took quiet notes. People told her what they remembered without wanting to choose sides. A boy with his hood up, late. A taller shadow, fast. Raised voices on that porch 2 weeks earlier. A mother's car idling while she argued with her brother under a yellow light. Phone records marked timestamps like tacks on a map. A ping near the corner store. A phone at home that went dark for 40 minutes without explanation. Texts that stopped mid-thread. They called in LaShonda. She sat straight, eyes forward. She said Derek had been out with a friend and didn't say the friend's name. 2 days later, officers knocked on 2 doors at once. Derek answered in a t-shirt and socks. Trey cursed and tried to close the gap, but the hallway was already full. On screen, a property bag seals around a pair of muddy sneakers. Another bag seals a pipe wrapped in towel. At the station, the camera watched a small room, a metal chair, a styrofoam cup leaving a ring on the table. Derek kept his eyes down until they showed him the footage. The corner store, the timestamps, The prince. He spoke. He told them about trust that became leverage, about a diagnosis that felt like a sentence, about a plan that felt like the only road left. Trey's story shifted when the evidence sat between them. The timeline didn't agree with his mouth. The warrants had done their work. The net tightened. The case moved. Courtrooms are designed to hold weight, wood that gleams, flags that don't move, a clock that sounds like order. The prosecution laid out a road with markers, grooming disguised as guidance, a hidden sexual relationship, an HIV diagnosis at 16, a confrontation that split a community, a plan to settle what the law might never touch, a night where anger found method. Forensics filled the gaps the words missed. The defense did not claim a phantom suspect. They described a boy cornered by betrayal, raised on trust that became a trap. They asked jurors to hold two truths in one hand, a life taken by violence and a child shaped by harm no one stopped. On screen, a graph appears, ages, dates, a line that starts with mentorship and ends in a morgue. LaShonda spoke with a voice that chose clarity over comfort. She said the date she learned her son was positive. She said the night she stood under the porch light and called her brother by name and told him what he would not say himself. The room stayed quiet in the way rooms do when they know they're hearing a truth that cannot be returned. The jury took hours that felt like days. The result, when it came, bent every plan. Second-degree murder for Derek, with age and circumstance noted. 20 years, parole possible after 12. First degree for Trey. Life. A gavel fell. It didn't feel like closure. It felt like a wall being built across a broken road. Life after verdict is quieter. LaShonda keeps her son's room neat but not untouched. Letters arrive from a state facility in steady handwriting. Medications mark mornings. Seasons pass. The church fills the podium, but the sound in that space has changed. Neighbors still wave, but the wave carries more questions than resolve. On screen, a final series of images. A closed door, a clinic hallway, a porch light, a map of the block with a small circle around one house. This story should have ended much earlier, at the first warning sign, at the first rule named protection that was really silence, at the first hand that held too long. But it didn't. And when the truth finally spoke, it spoke through a night that cannot be undone. If you believe that silence protects the wrong people, do something now. Share this story. Talk to someone who needs the words. Watch the trusted and verify the trust. Help a kid name what doesn't feel right. Because the next Baywood Drive doesn't have to end with police lights. It can end with someone being heard.